Good evening, everybody. My name is Marcus Hanscom. I'm the Director of Graduate Admission here at Roger Williams University, and I'm joined by Dr. Adam Moore, who's our Program Director for Special Education. I want to thank you for joining us for this session, and we'll give you an overview of the Special Education Master's Program and the various kind of ways and tracks that you can complete the program. One thing that I like as an admissions person and somebody that's really advising new students is that this is a program that is in high demand. There's a lot of great job opportunity at the other end, and there's a lot of flexibility in how you get it done. So we have some great options for students coming right out of undergraduate, including a +1 option, both for our internal students and external students, and also a part-time option for those that are currently teaching or working in other capacities. So Dr. Moore will talk to you more about that. And for those of you on the call, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them as we go throughout the session. But as always, feel free to reach out to either one of us, and you'll see our contact information at the end if there's any questions that we can answer for you. So without any further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Moore, and thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for coming tonight to hear a little bit more about the MA program in special education. So in general, there are two different tracks to choose from. One leads toward elementary special education licensure, and the other leads toward secondary special education licensure. We have multiple pathways and multiple opportunities depending on your situation and what you might be most inclined to go toward, but we have a 1 to 2 year program. The elementary track is a 36 credit hour program. The secondary special education track is 38 credits. We are fully approved by the Rhode Island Department of Education and accredited. We also designed the program. This is a new program, so we'll have our first full cohorts go through the program this year. But when we designed this new MA program, we designed it so we're fulfilling the Rhode Island Department of Education residency requirement. And so the RIDE, the state's accreditor, has approved our program as meeting the residency requirement that takes effect in December of 2022. And so that's an important part of the program because every program is grappling with that new procedure and new policy within the state, and so we are meeting that particular requirement. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about the courses. All of the courses align with the current demands in the field of special education, and I'll talk a bit more about that later. And there's a particular emphasis on culturally relevant and inclusive pedagogies in this program. So this is a program that's designed to prepare individuals to work in inclusive settings with students who have diagnosed disabilities. And so our emphasis is particularly on inclusive pedagogies and those pedagogies that are culturally relevant. One of the things that I think is really important if you're considering a master's degree program in special education is the demand in our field. Currently, we have in the nation, regionally and locally, a huge area of need in the field of special education. It's a huge shortage area. And so you may even find, if you're looking for jobs or paying attention to what's happening in the field, you may notice many more special education job openings than other areas in education. Nationally, it's the second most needed area of teacher certification, with 46 out of 50 states reporting a critical shortage. In the state of Rhode Island, it accounts for 14% of emergency certificates that the state issued in 2017, with one of the highest percentages of emergency certifications. In part, in developing this program, I surveyed close to 70 Rhode Island administrators and educators with a few Massachusetts administrators as well to identify if they see there being a need within this field of special education. And overwhelmingly, this group of folks identified special education as being one of the highest needed areas within the field of education. In general, apart from being more readily able to get a job in this field, this program will diversify your skill set. It will allow you to work with learners who come to you as an educator with a wide range of abilities, skill sets, and knowledge. And so you will learn evidence-based practices that will allow you to meet a student where they're at and move them forward in making progress wherever they come to you. Graduate degrees are expected in some states like Massachusetts and Connecticut, New York are all examples of states that require master's degree programs. And so our program allows you to be prepared for that if you choose to work in one of those states. It also is preferred by many school districts. Time and time again, school administrators say that they would prefer to hire a person who has dual certification in a general education area along with special education than they would someone who just has the general education certificate, even if you're accepting a job in a general education area. It also is going to differentiate yourself in the job market. One of the things that I think is important to realize is that special educators can take on a variety of different types of positions. Some examples of that might be a diagnostician, so a person who identifies a student as having a diagnosed disability. That can, a master's in special education can lead you toward that particular type of field or role in a classroom. Math interventionist, a person who works solely with students who struggle in math, who is working to supply the student with needed skills in a particular area in math. A person who works as an inclusion specialist, so someone who works with both educators and administrators to support them in including all students who have various needs and abilities within a general education classroom. And special education administrators. If you one day see yourself being an administrator in the field of special education, a master's degree program will lead you toward that particular pathway, likely with additional coursework and experiences that will supply you with the knowledge to be a special education administrator. But almost all special education directors within districts or assistant directors or IEP coordinators all have master's degree programs in special education.
Well, a couple of things I'll add to that too. Anybody who is a teacher now, or if you're going into teaching, virtually every classroom now has students with individual education programs, IEPs. So whether you're teaching at the elementary level or secondary, subject area or otherwise, you're going to have students that have a diverse set of needs. They'll also have inclusion needs and so on. So to have this kind of skill set added to your existing certification and other degrees and other education that you may have, it's going to make you that much better prepared for what tomorrow's classrooms are going to look like, because those are only increasing. We also found that, you know, for most students in most states, when you're going and you're working as a teacher, you know that there are opportunities for stepped salary increases, whether that be for additional set of a certain number of courses or even another degree. You have opportunities for salary growth and promotional opportunity by having these degrees. So there's a lot of upside in adding a master's of special education to your existing resume and portfolio.
So just some general information about the program. We offer full-time and part-time options. We also, in addition to that, offer a 4+1 program option for current Roger Williams students. So we'll talk a little bit about that on the next slide. All the courses are designed to be hybrid in that there will be either a fully online option or a combination of online coursework and face-to-face meetings. And so that's an important piece to understand about the program. All of those in-class face-to-face meetings that happen all happen at night. So they all happen after 5 p.m. So if in fact you do have a current teaching job, our program would allow you or could allow you to be a part of the coursework in a way that meets your particular area of need. The cost is there. We have the lowest cost structure within the university for our program. And so you can see the two per credit hour costs for the program in 2021 and 21-22. And Marcus will talk a little bit more about the financial aid options available. I think later, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So the program completion. So one of the things that I think is really important, so I'm a former special education teacher, and so for me, it's really important when I think about my role as a former special educator in an urban public school, it's really important for me to develop a program. When I was hired to develop this program, it was really important for me to develop a program that would prepare you for what you're going to see in the field. And so a lot of the different options that we have in front of you are really thinking through what I experienced when I was going through my graduate degree program as an educator, and thinking about how a person might arrive to wanting to go into the field of special education. So I mentioned that we have a RWU 4+1 program. And so this is for a current Roger Williams student who applies formally to the program their junior year, or starting this particular year if they have a particular GPA when they're admitted into Roger Williams and they are marked as an education student, they might be given a conditional acceptance into the 4+1 program. And so what that essentially means is that the senior year for an RWU student, they're taking 2 classes that are a part of the graduate program. And so on the next slide, we'll talk about what those 2 classes are and what they look like. But essentially, we designed the program that way to allow you to start completing your graduate degree as an undergraduate in your senior year with no additional tuition. So if you are not overloading with the university rules around how many credits you can take in a particular year, you are not paying any additional fee in order to take those 2 graduate courses your senior year. So we find that to be really beneficial. It sets up a current Roger Williams student with being able to start a graduate degree program and then to stay 1 additional year to complete the full graduate degree program. So you would come out with both dual certification in either elementary special education and elementary education, or secondary education in a content area like English or social studies or science or math, and secondary special education when you leave here. We also have the open 4+1 for external students. So taking 2 online courses their senior year at their particular undergraduate institution, and then completing those 2 courses their senior year, and then graduating from their institution, and then staying on 1 additional year to complete the graduate degree program here at Roger Williams. And I don't know, Marcus, if you wanted to add anything about that particular pathway, if there's anything else I'm missing about nuances.
Yeah, the only thing I would underscore with that is that the goal of the open 4+1 is essentially to give you the same benefit as an internal 4+1 student. The exception being that there is a nominal cost, whereas our students won't be paying any additional fee, but we've discounted it by nearly 75%. So if you're coming from an external program, you're in a teaching certification eligible program, and you want to pursue your master's in 1 year with us, we'll give you the benefit of taking those 2 graduate classes kind of independent of your undergraduate studies. Now, your institution may opt to take those classes as transfer to fulfill some of your undergraduate requirements, and that's certainly something that we found that students could do if they wanted to work that out with their schools. But the goal here being just that we give you 2 online courses wherever you are, whether you're in Massachusetts or California, you can still participate in a +1 opportunity with us at a significantly discounted rate. So you're essentially getting a $3,000 scholarship by doing that, and then able to continue through our master's program at a very affordable rate. So whether you're an external student, you're saving about $3,000 doing those 2 classes. The internal students with the 4+1 are going to save close to $4,000 with those classes. So we've really tried to make it economical for students that are going to be teachers and giving back to our communities in a much larger way, in an area that doesn't always pay as high as we'd like it to, but we at least like to acknowledge and thank the students that are going into a very valuable service career.
We also have the additional full-time option of 1 year. So for a candidate, let's say, who is looking for employment and doesn't have it, and they'd like to go back and get a special education certification to diversify their skill set, this would be a person who could complete the program in a pretty intense full-time 1 year program to get a master's degree leading towards special education. The part-time program generally has a candidate that would be allowed to take 1 to 2 courses per term and would complete the program in 2 years, or could complete the program in 2 years. The coursework spans over summer, fall, winter, and spring at various times. And so we're a program that really is thinking about preparing a person to go into the field of special education in a somewhat quick way, in a way that is sort of preparing you in a way that will give you the skill sets to be a really productive and skilled educator in special education, but in a more condensed fashion than other graduate programs in special education. So the full-time curriculum looks like this. So this particular slide shows what a person who, Roger Williams or an outside person completing the 4+1 program would take. So in the fall of their senior year, they would take one course that sort of introduces them to the legalities and the ethics around special education. That course is fully online. The second course that a person in the 4+1 program is also fully online, and that was done intentionally, knowing that a senior who's in college is also going to be completing their undergraduate general education certification in student teaching. We understand that you're going to be very busy. And so we designed those two classes to be fully online to allow you not to have to come to physical campus any particular day, even in the evening. We know that could be quite a burden on you. So we designed it in that way intentionally. A person in the 4+1 program is also going to then, after they graduate with their undergraduate degree, so in the spring of their senior year, they would graduate with either elementary or secondary education, and they would stay on right into the summer, starting as a graduate student. So they would take 2 courses in the summer, starting their graduate degree. They would stay on in the fall, taking either 3 or 4 courses, depending on the track. Elementary candidates take 3 courses when they are a full-time grad student in the fall. Secondary special education track take 4 courses, and so in the fall. And then you stay on starting in the winter, completing your full-time student teaching, winter all the way until graduation when you finish. I'll just talk about a little bit about the nuances of some of those classes. We believe philosophically within this program that inclusion is certainly an aspect of special education that needs to be considered fully when we are thinking about how we support individuals with exceptionalities. And so in the course, we're not just talking about how to diagnose and label a particular student with a particular disability. We're talking about how do we include this student holistically in the general education classroom, and how do we use evidence-based approaches that will meet them where they need. So in one of the first courses you take as a graduate student, the Pro-Social Behavior, EDU 613, we're talking about philosophies around behavior and supporting students with Dr. Ross Green's approach to collaborative and holistic approach to examining a child's needs, behaviorally, social, emotional learning. We're also talking in that same semester about how we collaborate with both teachers and families when we are working with students who have exceptionalities, and how we support our general education colleagues in using appropriate and effective co-teaching strategies. And so that kind of sets off the program in a way that really says that we're committed to culturally responsive and inclusive pedagogies in a way that might be different than some of the special education programs that you might be looking at or considering. During the full-time fall semester as a graduate student, you're taking classes that really are getting at the methodologies around inclusive pedagogies for students. So we're looking at literacy practices that help students who might have a specific learning disability in reading. We're looking at practices that would help a student who might have a particular disability that affects their math and content area. And then we're also talking about how students might be found eligible under that federal law IDEA. And so what assessment practices are the most effective in determining whether a student is eligible for special education services. If you're in the secondary special education track, you're also taking one additional 2-credit class that is post-secondary transition planning. And so in that class, you're learning about a student who is in high school and talking about how to prepare that student for whatever comes after high school, whether that be college, and that should always be the first consideration for any student, including students with disabilities, whether that be transitioning to a vocational or technical training program and so on. And so in that class, it's really essential to really look at the full range of transition that can happen for a particular student. One of the differences that might be true if you are a student who is in an undergraduate education program right now, many people start their student teaching, or what's known as student teaching or residency, depending on which state you are coming from. Most start when the university calendar starts in the spring semester. This program is a bit different in that you actually are starting your student teaching or your residency during when the particular school that you are paired with, whenever they come back from winter recess. So if you are working at a school that starts back on January 2nd, you would be beginning your student teaching or your residency on January 2nd. And you would be continuing that full-time student teaching from the beginning of January all the way until graduation at Roger Williams. In addition to that, your full-time student teaching or residency is what we call it in this program. You would also be completing the special education capstone. And in that class, you'll be writing your thesis, master's degree paper that will be work that you're completing within your residency or your student teaching placement as part of your master's degree program. Two things I'll point out. During the fall semester, you will be spending 2 days a week in a school, likely 2 different schools if you are in the full-time track, completing many of the things that we're talking about in the courses and the theories that we're talking about in those courses within a particular K-12 school. So you'll be fully engrossed and embedded likely in the fall semester in 2 different schools. One of the schools that you'll be in will also be the school that you continue on during the winter and spring semester for residency 1 or residency 2, or your student teaching placement all the way through graduation. We designed the program in that way because it's essential for all educators to know what happens at the beginning of a school year, but for special educators, it's, I would argue, even more important because much of what happens in the fall semester at the beginning of a particular year only happens right at that particular time. So special educators are working likely with many different general educators to set up a schedule to support and meet the needs of all students and to comply with IDEA. And so we want to make sure that whichever school you're completing your residency or your student teaching in, that you start there early in the fall. So when the school starts in the fall, the K-12 school starts in the fall, that you are out there in that particular placement. And so you're seeing what happens and what that clinical educator in the school is doing to prepare for their caseload and for supporting all of the students that they have within their particular school.
One small thing I just wanted to mention for those of you that might be external students interested in participating in either the full-time option without the +1 or even doing the open 4+1 option. Those summer courses actually start in our summer 2 term. And Adam, you can confirm, is it June that's the start? I think the 3rd week of June, is that correct?
So this particular year, I think it's the 3rd week or maybe even the 4th week of June through the end of July. Yeah.
Okay. So for those students that are participating from outside of the area that might be having to relocate here, even if you're relocating from a state away, you have that breathing room with the end of whenever you graduate from your undergraduate studies and moving and getting settled here and then getting your classes starting. We're not starting right after our commencement, so you're trying to rush out, 3rd week of May, and you've got no room between the start of your program and when you're commencing or when you're ending your undergraduate program. So that's a nice kind of window to work with the start of the program that way.
For the full-time curriculum, it's similar to all the classes that I've talked about. The arrangement of the classes looks a little bit different. And so one of the things that we decided as a program is to ensure that wherever you're at, if you're deciding in November, for example, that you want to apply to our program, we are working with candidates when they're applying or applicants when they're applying to let them start wherever it is that when they're applying to the program. So we have two particular candidates who applied in the fall of this year, and so they began classes in the winter intersession, and then went on to start classes in the spring. So this particular slide really is individualized depending on where it is you're coming from and when you're applying to the program. So I can say in our first year, we have been accommodating to two full-time and one part-time applicant candidate who's coming into the program. And so you will develop with me an individualized program of study that really is sort of meeting your needs. And so we'll look at how quickly you want to complete the program. If you're working in a full-time job, which one of our current candidates is, we'll be working with you and your school and your administrators to ensure that you can complete the requirements of our program in a way that allows you to continue working if you're working in a particular setting that would allow you to complete the requirements for licensure under the Rhode Island Department of Education standards. And so I think that's important to know if you are watching this or if you're with us tonight, to know that to please reach out. Don't look at this schedule and think that these are hard and fast guidelines that have to be followed. We're willing to work with you to provide you with the training and that leads you toward licensure and certification in the area that you would like to.
And Adam, why don't I, if I could ask for the benefit of the group, are there particular courses from a sequential nature, whether it be prerequisites or otherwise, that are necessary so that, yeah, we can come in fall or spring or maybe even summer, but is there a part where it's particularly disruptive if a student came in that it's really going to be challenging to get them done in a reasonable amount of time?
No, we designed it in a way that no matter when a person would start, we're gonna be able to get you, set up with the classes you need. So for example, if you were to start in the fall and you were a part-time student, I would pick EDU 608, which is Legal and Ethical Foundations of Special Education, likely paired with the research-based literacy practices to start taking if you were taking 2 courses that first semester as a fall candidate. But if you were coming in the spring, then the courses that you would take would obviously look different because they're offered in different times. But because the program is small and we work in a cohort basis and the faculty that are working in this program are talking all the time, and the program was really designed by a very small group of faculty, the benefit of that, which I think is really important to take note of, is that you are learning skills in each of these classes that are revisited throughout the entire program. So what you're learning about in 608 is not only learned about in that one particular isolated class, but you're hearing about the concepts around IDEA and around FAPE throughout many of the courses in the program. And so a lot of the concepts are revisited, and that's done intentionally so that depending on when it is you're coming into the program, you're going to be hearing this information over and over again. And so there's not a necessary prerequisite setup with the particular courses and how they were designed or laid out in the program. So it's a really good point to make, and I'm glad Marcus asked it. I do often forget to mention that. And that's the benefit of a small program like coming to Roger Williams to a master's degree program. I know the institution that I'm very grateful to have a master's degree from, it wasn't set up in that way. And so it was sort of a menu of options to pick from. And so I didn't always feel like, when I was an educator at the time, I was a full-time teacher at the time, going back at night, I didn't always feel like I necessarily had the class at the time when I needed it, number one. And number two, sometimes the skills and the topics that were talked about in a particular class weren't necessarily connecting over the course of the program. And so one of the things that was done very intentionally in this program was to really think about that, thinking about sort of the things that frustrated me in my graduate program and how to try to eliminate some of that nuance that was frustrating to me.
Well, Adam, one other question. So part-timers, when they come in, many of them are part-time because they're working in some capacity, and often, the students coming in from an eligibility standpoint, we'll get to that, but students have to have at least eligibility, if not be certified already. So if they're working in a school system, either part-time or full-time, how are they going to be able to complete the clinical pieces of the program? That residency sounds like it's certainly daytime commitments. How are you working with students that are already committed in a classroom?
It really is on an individual basis. So there's one particular current candidate in the program where their employer is fully committed to working with us, to coming up with a plan to allow her to look at other classrooms, not just her own, in times that she can be released within her classroom and setting. Another applicant that applied to the program, who is currently in the program, was working in a non-certification area. So this was a candidate who was certified in a particular area, but where they were working was not where they were certified. And so for that particular person, we had to have a conversation around that and say, well, so that during your clinical field work, it would have to be in a K-12 setting. And in this particular situation, the example was not in a K-12 setting. It was in an early childhood setting. And so we obviously have to follow the Rhode Island Department of Education guidelines and standards for certification, and we do that really closely to ensure that you are eligible for applying for certification once you exit the program. But we're willing to work with you, and so we're willing to work with your employer and your administrator to set up situations in which you can continue employment in a high need area. And we're also relying on the Rhode Island Department of Education to give us guidance around these issues as they come up. So again, it's sort of that the thing that I said before, which is the benefit of working in a small program. Other larger programs may not have that luxury to be able to look at a person and say, here's your situation, let's work out a plan that will allow you and the Ride certification to work out for you, and not just say, well, unfortunately, this is your situation, you shouldn't come into the program, or you shouldn't apply to the program, or we can't accept you into the program. So we're working to really meet people where they're at, because we know, and Rhode Island Department of Education knows, that this is an area that is in high need, and there are places in our state and in our region, and certainly nationally, in which there are current vacancies in special education. So we want to make sure that we're training folks to be prepared for the field, and we want to make sure that we're doing it in a way that's not causing people to have to not continue on in their employment in order to do it, if we can.
Well, and just as an aside to that, I mean, Dr. Moore is not going to be speaking. He's a modest guy. He's not going to be patting himself on the back. But one thing that I've observed as an admissions person on the outside is that we've had some rather tricky situations with different student backgrounds and licensure and different things. And Dr. Moore has been very, very personalized with his approach with every single student. And I think one of the nice things about our Department of Education collectively is that they have a very tight relationship with the Rhode Island Department of Education, and everything that they do is consistent with not only their current regulations, but what their anticipated regulations are going to be. And you heard Dr. Moore speak about that earlier in terms of some of the residency requirements that are likely coming. So it's really good that, Rhode Island Department of Education has among the most stringent requirements in the country, as does Massachusetts. And so we've been very much with our eye on the prize, making sure that we're focused on what those regulations are, keeping up with each of them, and looking at every single student's record with a fine-tooth comb to make sure that we are meeting all of those regulations, because we certainly don't want to mislead you on your eligibility when you graduate. So we're going to bring you into the program with your eyes wide open on exactly what opportunities you have on the other side, rather than us kind of throwing our hands up and wondering what will happen. There's a very consistent and personalized approach to making sure that you meet those requirements by the time you graduate.
So one of the things to point out, and this is a Rhode Island Department of Education guideline, in order to be eligible for special education, either at the elementary level or the secondary level, you must either possess or be eligible for obtaining an elementary or secondary general education certification. So secondary general education certification, like in science or mathematics or English or social studies, and there are others as well, including K-12 certifications in the secondary area. So that's a requirement by the state of Rhode Island. So if you are someone who doesn't meet that particular area, I encourage you to reach out to me or to Marcus so we can have conversations with you around that particular area. particularly if you are working on an emergency certification as a special educator in a school in Rhode Island or outside of Rhode Island. We definitely would talk to you about the nuances of your particular situation to really understand what it is that you're hoping for and why you're working under emergency certification. But that is a requirement by the state and many other states as well, that you have general education certification. 4+1 students have to be a senior when they are taking those 2 introductory classes that I talked about before, those fully online classes. And most of the students who are applying to the 4+1 program are juniors, and so there's a preferred deadline your junior year to apply for that program. March 1st being the sort of the preferred deadline for that application for the +1 opportunities. All other candidates, the preferred deadline is August 1st for fall admission and January 1st for spring admission. Again, they're preferred. So if you are outside that window, again, we're a small program. We're thinking about individuals who, I know the institution that I went to, a larger place, had a pretty strict deadline for applications. And I think it's important to know that if you're outside of that window, don't not contact Marcus or I about applying. I really encourage you to reach out via email, phone call, to really check in about that, to inquire about where we're at with the applications, because I think that part of why I'm committed to this program is because there is such a need nationally, regionally, and locally for talented, committed, passionate, compassionate special educators. And so I don't want a set of deadlines to sort of dictate whether or not you're applying to this program to go into this particular field. I want it to be something that you're really driven to do to have an impact on our field in a positive way and in a way that thinks about inclusion and equity and so on. So please reach out if you're outside of those preferred application windows. We also have a preferred 3.0 GPA or higher to apply to the program.
And one thing about the GPA too, again, if you have a 2.9 or something, don't go, I can't apply. Talk to us, especially often students who have some level of experience already too. That certainly carries weight. But I know Dr. Moore and the faculty will review in a holistic manner and look at your entire record, and it's not purely a number on a piece of paper. It's something beyond that in terms of your character and your compassion and your care for this field and doing better for the field itself. So those are things that they all consider. So I'll jump in here with some of the application requirements. We have an online application as most schools do at this point. It is directly through Roger Williams, so it is not a centralized application service, which you may see for some disciplines. So just go to our website. We are currently waiving all application fees. We're in the midst, obviously, of the COVID-19 outbreak. So as a kind of consideration for all of our students, you've got a lot of competing commitments right now, especially financially. So the last thing we want is to charge an application fee on top of all that. So please use the code HEALTHY and that'll waive your fee. We also require you to submit all official transcripts, and that's true of any school. So it's not like Roger Williams is being a stickler. Every university that you apply to will ask for you to submit transcripts from your undergraduate studies, even if there's just a few courses somewhere or an associate's degree. So send all those transcripts to us. We are being a little more flexible, especially now being online, that if you can only get us unofficial scanned transcripts or something in the short term, we'll work with you on that. If you are a Roger Williams student, don't go out and get your transcripts. We will take care of that for you. So any internal transcripts we'll take care of. But if you're an external student, please request them from your registrar's office. They do have to be issued from your registrar's office. However, again, and especially at times of evaluating your transcripts for admission, we can use even something printed off of student portal if you have access to, if it's on Blackboard or whatever your school uses. If you can print your transcript there as a short-term solution, we will take that, but we'll need something more official by the time you start in the program, but we can work with you on that. We also ask for a letter of intent, and this is something that from a character perspective, more subjective, more qualitative, opportunity for us to assess your fit for the program. This is an opportunity for you to really show us what we're looking for. About 3 pages, double space, so not real heavy lifting here, but we are asking 2 very specific questions for you. So first, why do you hold the dispositions of becoming a special education teacher committed to equity? And talk about experiences that inspired your desire to work with youth with exceptionality. So obviously very core to the mission and the vision of the program, and just assessing that you're the appropriate fit for our program. And as you're going through and selecting a program, you might be looking at other master's degrees in this area. You want to be looking for appropriate fit, and that's something that we're looking for and something we hope that you're looking for. And when you're looking at fit, you want to be talking about the faculty and whether they're committed to certain issues. You know, our program, as Dr. Moore mentioned, very inclusion focused, diversity focused. In this day and age, that's really important, certainly, especially with some of the new regulations coming out. So that's something that is a core focus of our program. We are a smaller program. From a mission standpoint, the institution is about that service and kind of giving back, and our Department of Education is very well regarded in this area. So as you're considering fit, you know, look at those various qualitative measures of the program. Look at where graduates are from the various programs that you are. Again, our program is newer, so we will be admitting our first cohort this fall. So we have about 15 students that we're anticipating starting in that first cohort. But if you look at our education students, they're teaching not only around the region, but around the country. So very well known and well regarded. If you want a larger program where you're more of a number, that's not going to be Roger Williams. So be considering what the types of scheduling and the research and the program focus and location and all those various things in terms of fit. And if we can help you in clarifying what those pieces are, please let us know. But on the flip side of that, the faculty are looking for you similarly to be a good fit for our program. And if you're articulating things that speak to inclusion and diversity and supporting students with exceptionalities and being really committed to the field and being a teacher and giving back to society, those are the things that are going to echo very favorably with the faculty and fitting you appropriately with the program. We also asked for two professionals. Sorry, Adam, go ahead.
Sorry, Marcus. Two things that made me think of things that I just wanted to highlight quickly when you talked about faculty. So all the classes in our program will be taught by full-time faculty members who are committed to these issues around equity and inclusion and so on. In addition to that, at least this first particular year, the adjuncts who are teaching in the program or who are slated to teach in the program are two of them are special education administrators, and that's done purposely. We want you all to be working with folks who could be your potential employers at some point, who are experts in the field, who have done this work over and over again. And in addition to that, others who have terminal degrees in special education, who again are very knowledgeable and have been committed to the field, and in particular committed to the issues around equity, diversity, working with students who have been minoritized in our schooling system. And so that's really an important feature that I sometimes don't highlight, because the talent within the faculty who are in this program is pretty exceptional, particularly for a really small program. And so that's definitely something that I just wanted to highlight. So sorry about that, Marcus, but.
No, I think that's great too, and I'll speak to that real quickly. I think the balance of faculty is really important for those of you considering the program, because there are a lot of programs that are very adjunct heavy, and there's not necessarily anything inherently wrong with an adjunct, because adjuncts are working in the field and they know what's happening on the ground, which is good. But to have a balance of both folks that are out in the community that are teaching, or administrators in special education, they know what's happening on the front lines, but then you also have educators that have terminal degrees that have done significant research, that understand the data and the research and the best practice behind all of the work that you're doing in the community. That's a great balance to see both sides of that coin, and not every program does that. Many programs are very heavy on PhDs, so you've got a lot of research, but not a lot of ground folks, and then you've got other programs that are very ground heavy, but very little of the research. So you'll see both sides of that, and I think that's critical to getting a really well-rounded and strong graduate program, of any program, but special education in particular, for sure. That's a huge benefit to you. In addition to some of the items we already talked about, you have your two professional letters of recommendation, and we note professional here only being that we're not asking you to get them from family members. Occasionally students confuse that, but we're looking for you to submit letters from faculty, especially if you're an undergraduate student or a recent graduate. Also supervisors at work, particularly if you've worked with children. So whether you're teaching currently, or it's common for a senior that maybe has had a field experience, so they have somebody that's a field supervisor, and then maybe they've worked at a daycare or they've done babysitting in the past. those are appropriate recommendations because they can speak to your work with children or work with students with exceptionalities and so on. Professional references as well, even being just an employer, understanding your work ethic, your ability to work in teams, your ability to deal with conflict. Those types of things are helpful in the faculty and understanding your ability to work through a challenging program like this, but really be understanding of people and be able to interact appropriately. So all of those things are important when you're selecting your recommenders. We require 2. That doesn't mean you have to stop at 2 if you'd like an additional recommendation. Certainly, we don't discourage you from doing that. Part of the process will also be an interview, likely with Dr. Moore, and be talking really about the program. Maybe actually, Dr. Moore, why don't you talk a little bit about that process just so people can understand what an interview is going to be like for them?
Sure. So I asked the same questions to every applicant, just really getting a sense of your intention, your desire to go into this particular field in our particular program, your understanding around issues critical to the focus of this particular program in special education and in the field of special education in general. And so we set up that one-on-one interview after you have fully completed the application process. I'll reach out to you to set up a time for an interview. Some of those interviews have been face-to-face. Currently, all of those interviews are happening virtually. And so we set up a mutual time that works for you. Typically, the interview lasts around 30 minutes. A lot of that time, to be honest, is your opportunity to ask questions about the program, to get more information about what to expect and so on. But that piece I feel is a really critical part of the application process because it allows you, one, to learn a bit more about the program, but it also allows me to hear about sort of the some of the things you can't necessarily read on a paper application, and some of the nonverbal and sort of passion that can come across in an interview can only happen when you're talking to a person, and might not necessarily happen on paper in your application.
Well, that's a great point, Adam, because we had a student actually in a different program, but a competitive academic program that we met at a conference, ironically, and I had a faculty director with me, and that student on paper was going to be denied, but she met this faculty member, and it was like the student lit up. You could tell she was passionate about the field. Her research interests aligned well with our faculty, and all of a sudden the faculty member turned to me after she left and she said, I want her in my program. I said, you know, her GPA and GREs look like this, and we'd already talked about a potential denial. She said, I don't care, I want her in my program. So that interview is a very critical part of that process, especially if academically, maybe on paper, you are that 2.8 student, but you've maybe done some really significant things in the community, or you've taught, or you've done other things, or just that passion is there that, sometimes you shine better than some of the other students do. So it's interesting. That's an educational study in and of itself, right? So aside from the interview, then you have, we ask you to submit a current resume. And we understand, juniors or seniors maybe don't have a huge resume, but anything, even babysitting, counts as job experience that's relevant to the program. And I think that relevancy is important. If you've had any sort of work experience, especially the junior or senior in college, that's all relevant. But especially if you've even done babysitting or daycare work or parent or whatever those things are. And certainly teachers will have your teaching experience and other things. So your resume is required. We also ask for, if you're teaching, a copy of your current certificate, which you can just scan to us, or just proof of eligibility. If you're in an undergraduate program that you'll be graduating with teacher certification, we can verify that with you. And finally, the last piece is your BCI. It's the Bureau of Criminal Investigation, basically criminal background check that you can get done with your local police department. It's usually a $10 or $20 charge. You'll check on your local police department's website. You want to get it in the town that you reside in. And if you check on their website, you'll be able to see what their process is. Oftentimes, there might be certain windows of time that you can do it during the week, and you go in, just give them the $10, and then they run it for you, and then you can scan that to us. So it's not something that has to be presented, sealed, and all of that in the mail to us, but you can send that along. If you're a Roger Williams student, by the time you're a sophomore or junior, you're already getting that done because you're doing some student teaching anyhow. So the field office with the department or School of Education will have that on file. So we don't need you to go and get another one. We'll take care of obtaining that for you. But anybody outside, even if you're at another school that's in a teaching certification program, you may have had that done as well. So if you just get a copy of that and send it over to us, that would be sufficient. So you can apply online on our website that you see there on the screen. Once you get to that site currently, and we're actually in the midst of switching application systems for this summer, so it's not switching yet, but at the moment, select your population. So whether you're a current student or if you're outside, you select on that and it'll tell you which term. So you can just select your term and the appropriate application there. And then your required materials, especially now, as I mentioned, we can take virtually everything electronically. Some schools will only issue transcripts in hard copy form. That's fine. You can have that mailed. We are checking mail and going into the office periodically, so that's fine if you want to have that sent that way. Again, otherwise we can take an unofficial transcript in the short term. So especially right now, if you'd like to just print something off your portal and scan that to us as a PDF, that's fine. Your letter of intent, resume, you can email to us, scan the copy of your BCI, or even just take a photo of it with your phone, whatever's easiest for you. The letters of recommendation are a little trickier, but as long as they originate from your recommender, we can take them electronically. So you'll fill out their information on the application. They'll get an invitation to submit it, and they can do that right through the application system itself. Or if it's easier, they can use the email that you see on the screen there, and they can just email their letter directly to us. Sometimes there's some trouble with receiving the invitation from our system. If that's the case, you can just have them email it to us. So we don't require that that form be filled out, but if they're able to submit their letter even through email, that's fine. We just can't accept it by way of the student. So if they send it to you and then you send it to us, we can't consider that official. But if they send it any other way directly to us, either by mail or an email, we'll take it that way. So a couple of things about the financial aid side of the house. For those of you that are undergraduates now, this is definitely gonna be a change than what you're used to. And for those of you that are working, have some different other opportunities, especially if you're teaching, you might be in a school district that offers some level of tuition remission. So we encourage you to look into those opportunities. We're also gonna be looking to form some partnerships that offer some discounted opportunities for local districts in the coming year or so. So keep an eye out for that. But those of you that are in undergrad and coming into grad, it's a little bit different because it's not like there are an infinite number of scholarships and grants and things available. And as Dr. Moore mentioned earlier on, the tuition is priced very competitively within the school. Many of our graduate programs, for the most part, our graduate programs are priced at nearly $300 or more per credit hour than the special education program. And when we created this program, we had the opportunity to price it the same as that program and give scholarships, which the scholarships would be given to a subset of students. Or did we say, does it make sense because these students are all going into a very important industry and doing important work that arguably is not paid the way that it probably should in terms of its value to society? Why don't we give everybody a financial benefit of a lower tuition? So that's what we opted to do. So as you come into this program, your tuition is priced much lower than most of our other programs so that you all get the collective benefit of a more affordable graduate degree. The last thing we want is for you to feel bankrupt or burdened by loans when you get out of the program. Now, because of some of both the focuses of the program and because inclusion is obviously important, but also because of some of our directives through the Rhode Island Department of Education, we are offering some limited scholarships for students from racially minoritized backgrounds. So we are considering students for those opportunities as they come into the program as an opportunity to really encourage more students of color, more teachers of color, and joining the industry, because it's very important that we have more teachers of color in our communities. We also have some limited grants available that we'll make available to students that have demonstrated financial need. That's a very small number of grants that we have, but we do have some limited money available where students have a demonstrated need. So it's not something that every student will receive, but we will consider students on an as needed basis if that's critical. So please let us know. Beyond that, and this is where the primary changes for particularly most recently undergraduates, but any student, the bulk of master's students, and this is different than doctoral studies, and any of you that pursue that, we can certainly go deeper into that. But master's students, for the most part, are paying for the majority of their studies through federal student loans. And nobody likes the loan idea, and I understand that. But one of the benefits of these federal loan programs is that they have flexible repayment over long periods of time. They have lower interest rates. And currently, there's the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, which most of you will qualify for if you choose to follow the kind of regimented pieces of that program, where you pay over 10 years with one of the federal repayment plans. And the goal of that being that if you followed that to a T, and it is the government, so they are expecting you to follow those instructions very specifically, but at the end of 10 years, the balance of your loans would be forgiven. So that's a really nice program as long as it stays around. There's been more political discussion about it lately, but that may be an opportunity, and you're all going into a program that will largely have that opportunity with the jobs that you'll have afterward. So very quickly, there are two federal loan programs that you'll see available. One is the Federal Direct Unsubsidized Loan Program. You can take up to $20,500 per year in that program. Now, considering your tuition, I think in total, let's see, it's 36 credits for most of you. It's 12 courses. I'm trying to do quick math. One class is about $2,000, so it's about a $24,000 program. That loan, if you're in a one-year program, that's going to cover most of your tuition costs and your fees, with some limited exception. Now, you can borrow beyond that $20,500 in the PLUS loan. Some of you, especially undergraduates, may have taken a Parent Plus loan before with your parents. As a graduate student, parents are no longer part of that equation. When you fill out the FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid, and you indicate you're a graduate student, only your finances become the important part of that equation. So what that does for most students is that negates a lot of assets and finances that their parents otherwise brought to the FAFSA, and it makes them eligible for a lot more money in terms of grants and things, or loans anyway. So the PLUS loan now, which will be under your name, no longer Parent Plus loan, is available up to what we call the cost of attendance. And that cost of attendance number factors in your required fees like tuition and fees, and then there's a loan origination fee. It's a couple $100s. And then beyond that, we have optional costs where you can opt to take money for housing, food, books, transportation, and any other miscellaneous expenses that you might have while you're in school. So if you're a part-time teacher or a full-time teacher in this area and you're commuting to us from Fall River or Bristol or Portsmouth, you might not need to take any of that kind of extra budget money. Some students, we've seen part-time students take some of that extra budget money because they're maybe foregoing some of their income. Maybe they're going from a full-time teaching gig to a part-time gig just while they're doing their schooling, and then they go back to doing full-time. Whatever your financial circumstances are, it's certainly very personal to each student. But you can opt to take up to that cost of attendance. Now, most students never borrow up to the cap of that, but the goal of the cost of attendance is to provide a maximum so that you're not over borrowing. We don't want you to be overburdened with loans when you graduate. But we want to make sure that you have the financial support that you need while you're in school. So if you're a student coming from, say, New Hampshire, and you're in the open 4+1, and you decide to relocate down here, you're going to need an apartment for a year. You might need support for getting back and forth on the bus if you don't have a car. Maybe you need help for your meals. Maybe you won't have time to do part-time work on the weekends. Some students do, but those types of things are considerations as you're taking these loans. So if you want to take money, you can borrow up to that cost of attendance if you need it. And again, most students don't need all of that, but based on your personal circumstances, you might have some support from family or otherwise. So that all factors in, and you can take as much or as little of those loan programs that are offered to you. Certainly the $20,500 is most competitive for you because you get the lowest interest rate. And then any money you borrow in the PLUS loan will always be just 1 percentage point higher. These are really kind of my last point on the loans, and I know it's boring stuff, but it's important. When you're looking at other loans, you may find that loans from, say, a credit union might say, oh, we'll give you a special loan rate of 4%. That sounds great from an interest rate perspective. The trouble is they often want you to repay within 5 or 10 years. And especially with students on teacher salaries, you may or may not feel comfortable paying that back in that time frame. It may squeeze things a little bit more than you'd like to. So with the federal loan programs, you have payment terms of often 15 or 20 years, even 25 years in some of those programs. And they also offer some repayment options that are income-based. So if you graduate and you're working as an entry-level teacher, you might be making $45,000 or $40,000. And so your payment for your loans is capped at a certain percentage of that number. And then as you make more money over time, then that scales up to be, again, that same percentage point, but it scales up to be something that's more comfortable for you, rather than you graduate and you're like, oh no, I've got a $500 loan payment, I can't pay it. So there's a lot of flexibility with those federal loan programs, and we're happy to answer any further questions that you have. If you look on our website as well, I posted a recorded session last week on financing your graduate education that goes a little bit more into specifics about each of those pieces. So certainly look at that if you have further questions, and we can answer questions as well. Certainly, if you have an opportunity, join us on Facebook. We've got a public facing group as well as our page rather, and we have a private group that's all graduate students and prospective graduate students for the university, and that's a great place, especially if you're coming from outside the area and you need to find roommates or housing, or just want to find out what it's like to be a student at Roger Williams. You can join that group, and we verify every student that goes in there, so it's not open to just anybody. We're also on Instagram and Twitter, so you can find us there. So, and if you have any questions, this is our contact information. These are our direct lines, so it's not to the pizza place. So we're happy to help you and be as personalized and customized as you need it to be. These times are certainly presenting us with some challenges that we didn't anticipate, but I think we've adapted pretty well. We're all remote, but we're also very accessible. So if you'd like to set up a virtual meeting with Dr. Moore or myself, set up a phone call, we're happy to do any of that we can. We've also done virtual tours for students, so I can FaceTime you from campus if that's helpful, but anything you need. So Dr. Moore, do you want to add anything else before we go?
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of virtual speaking with families and with prospective applicants. I'm also happy to connect you with any current students in our program, to speak with them, to get sort of an unfiltered look at what the program is all about. Happy to provide you with that contact information. I have several students who reached out to me to say, hey, I know you're in the middle of this, so please let me know if I can talk to anybody to kind of help give a perspective of those first couple of classes, because this is our first year in the program. But please reach out. I think that for me, why I really like and am passionate about working at Roger Williams and thinking about this program is the fact that we are a small program and we're committed to the students that we have in our programs. And so please reach out if you have questions. Don't hesitate if you think your question is not worthy of asking. Please reach out. We're committed to preparing special educators to be committed to equity and to be committed to social justice and to be committed to making a difference out in the schools that you work. So I'm happy to answer any question you may have or chat with you at any time. So thanks for joining us tonight for sure. And Marcus, thank you for all your support with talking about our program.
Of course. Thanks, Dr. Moore, and thanks everybody for joining us, and appreciate your time. If you're watching this back later as a recorded thing, and feel free to use our contact information for anything you need. So thanks so much and be well.